Yes, next slide, please. Let's come to NWO. What is it? It is a national research council, like almost every country has. And the NWO has the legal duty to fund academic research. I put there primarily because we do fund other types of research, and that is up to the funding program to determine which type of research is being funded. Our key values, you can see at the left-hand side: connecting, reliable, committed, and groundbreaking. Next slide, please. And our mission, in very general terms, is to facilitate world-class research with scientific and societal impact. And I would like to stress, because that is forgotten quite often, that we fund research with scientific, but also with societal impact. That is getting more and more important when evaluating and when funding research. Next slide, please. The third fact about NWO I would like to mention is that since 2019, so not a long time ago, since 2019, NWO is a kingdom-wide organization. So researchers from institutions in the whole Kingdom of the Netherlands are allowed to present applications for funding at NWO. Before 2019, this was restricted to the European part of the Netherlands. Next slide, please. Some basic facts about the NWO. We have different departments. I will come back to them later. And we also have different major funding lines of funding lines. And the rest is less important, except from the annual budget. That's about 1 billion euros, which we distribute annually. Next slide, please. So I'd like to start to explain what NWO actually funds and what we cannot fund, because that is the basis for collaborating also with you. The NWO basically provides competitive funding for researchers of public academic institutions, such as universities, but also other institutions, which are listed on the NWO website. It is important to understand that our funds are distributed in a competitive way. So it is always difficult, in fact, to receive NWO grants, because all the grants are distributed on the basis of competitions. Just to explain the position of NWO funding in the bigger funding scheme of research, you should look at the right-hand diagram. So we are funding researchers and institutions, but that is only in addition to base funding from governmental sources. So we are not the only, and by far not the largest, funder in the research system. The largest funder is actually the governments, which fund the basic infrastructure and the salaries of professors, etc. There is another funding stream, and these are third parties. Additional funding may also come from, for instance, industry, private funds, international funding organizations. So we operate in this general context. Next slide, please. You have the next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, maybe go one back, please. My own screen sharing, it didn't work properly, so I asked Stephen to do that for me. Thank you very much. May we go back one more time to the previous slide? Yes, because the next one, please. I will just continue talking.
I'm sorry, could you please indicate again which slide?
The next one.
Okay. This one?
And then one more click, should appear something, yes. Okay. And NWO does not fund, that's very important, I think, to realize and to stress, that we do not fund private parties like SMEs and industries. That's not our legal task. For this, I would like to refer you to our colleagues from the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, RVO. It is their task to fund private partners. However, SMEs and industry, they often take part in NWO programs, but they don't receive funding, but they provide funding for research in our programs. Private partners may also provide in-kind contributions like knowledge or working hours of their employees to support specific projects. And NWO has a broad range of funding instruments, and they are usually published as calls for proposals, as we call them. And they are published all year round. So there is not a specific time when we publish calls. Next slide, please. Just to continue on what and whom we fund, NWO has a broad range of calls, and they are aimed at different people or groups of people. We have funds for individual scientists, for small teams, and also for larger consortia. And I'd like to stress that the team and consortia science is increasing in importance. That is a global trend in science, and I think personally that it is related to the fact that problems are getting more complex and that they require collaboration between different scientists to be solved. Next slide, please. NWO funds all, maybe one back, please. NWO funds all disciplines of science except for medical and health research. And why is that? That's because there is another organization called SONMW, and that is the Council for Health Research. That's our colleagues at the same location in The Hague, but they are responsible for funding health and medical research. Of course, we have a very good cooperation with them. Next slide, please. Now, to find out where you could look for blue and green funding opportunities, I have to overload you a little bit with the structure and the funding lines of NWO. In the top row, you see the different departments. These are the main departments of NWO: social sciences and humanities, applied and engineering sciences, and natural sciences. So it is not really very relevant for you, but if you look for specific programs, you might have to look into the different programs of the departments. All of the departments, and then the next two yellow and brown funding lines, open competition and talent programs. These are programs in which you can submit any idea. So they are not thematic. You can always submit research proposals. The requirement is that it is a brilliant idea. So if you have a very brilliant idea about something, you can submit it in these open competition and talent programs. Now, there are a few other thematic program lines, and they are more relevant, I think, for the discussion of today. We have public-private partnerships in which we collaborate with private partners, governments, industry, and where in many cases, private partners also take an active role in providing contributions. That's we call this the 𝗙𝗟𝗃 program, because it's based on the knowledge and innovation covenant. And another funding line is the Dutch National Research Agenda Program, which is aimed at societal issues. So 𝗙𝗃 is aimed at economic issues. NWA is more aimed at societal issues. Of course, there is an overlap between these two broad areas. And it is worth mentioning that in these two program lines, we are asking for consortia. So these are not funds for individuals, but often require formation of consortia. And I wanted to mention also the Caribbean Research Program, of course, but in terms of funding volume, this is much smaller than the other funding lines on this diagram. And I think research infrastructure is less relevant here, although I want to mention it. We have funds available for buying big research infrastructure. Next slide, please. And I would like to come to some current examples of blue and green calls. So first, have a look. If you open our website, where we have listed all the calls, I've done that yesterday, and I saw that we have 43 calls open. So you can already imagine that it's a rather big, a rather broad area, and you have to find the appropriate calls for yourself. I mentioned a few of them. One of them is an international call on biodiversity and ecosystem protection, which is actually handled by the so-called European Partnership on Biodiversity, and we take part in this partnership. And institutions on the Caribbean islands are fully entitled to participate in these funding programs. Next slide, please. I show two more examples of blue and green calls. Of course, I should not forget to mention an international call on predicting sargassum blooms in the Caribbean region. That is part of the Caribbean Research Program, and we collaborate in this call with the French Research Council and with a few countries in Latin America. A national call, just as an example, is microbiome. And that is an example from collaboration with industry. So you can find opportunities for funding research in the blue and green area in different funding schemes of NWO. And to help you a little bit in getting through this complex system, I would like to share some general advice. Next slide, please. Maybe some of you have are getting the impression that NWO is a little bit like a jungle, and it is tempting to have a look, but there is also a considerable chance of getting lost, and that is in fact true. So what could you do? I would say, like in a real jungle, take a guide and ask questions about calls and programs. All programs and all calls have a program officer, a colleague of mine, who can answer all your questions. So this is just an example, like it appears on our website. Don't call this specific colleague. It is just an example. If you don't know, if you have an idea and you don't know which call is suitable for you, then you might first ask your own institution. Maybe there are knowledgeable people knowing these kind of things, or colleagues and peers of yours. But if you can't find an answer easily, don't hesitate to mail, call, chat. You can always contact us or contact me at the Caribbean Research Program, and we can try and find the appropriate specialist within NWO who can answer your questions. Next slide, please. It's very important, I think, to stay informed, because we publish many calls all year round. And so you should be aware of the big events. You can have a look at the NWO website. You can also have a look at the free magazine Onderzoek. But I think the most helpful way of staying informed is by subscribing to the free 2-weekly newsletter. You can find that on our website, and you can subscribe to it there. You can even choose subjects from a range of texts that might be especially interesting for you. Next slide, please. And the final advice I would like to share is team up. Discuss your ideas, even if the research is meant for one individual. Discuss it with experienced peers, because it will improve your application. It will make you more knowledgeable maybe about the process. You may also wish to attend NWO matchmaking events. I just put an example of that on this slide. And that is especially helpful for forming consortia. If you are looking for organizations to collaborate for a certain project, then you might be able to find them at the matchmaking events of NWO. One other fairly new possibility is to join the new online community, 𝗕𝗹𝗄, which we initiated from NWO on the request of the Caribbean research community. You can find the specialists there, and you can also find many announcements of NWO there, and you can discuss, you can ask questions, you can chat. So that's basically what I wanted to say. Next slide, I think that's the last. We have the next slide. Yes, thank you for listening, and I hope we will receive some applications from some of you soon.
Thank you, Josef Stuefer, for sharing information about the funding opportunities at NWO, NWO, as we say in Dutch. So thank you, and I think we can expect some questions later on in the Q&A session. I would like to go to the next speaker. That's Mrs. Vanessa Torre. She's the director of EU desk, and she will talk about the funding opportunities that mainly Erasmus Plus has to offer. But I'm very, very happy to have Vanessa Torre with us, and to so that she can share her vision and the information about the funding opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, Vanessa Torre.
Thank you very much, Germaine. Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody is still engaged this morning after some interesting topics that were brought forward by the previous panelists. As mentioned, I'm the director of Foreign Economic Cooperation Division within the Ministry of Economic Development of Curaçao. And one of the units under my division is the EU Desk Curaçao, which we established in 2018. So yesterday or 2 days ago, it was the 3rd anniversary of the EU Desk Curaçao, and we are very proud of where and what we have accomplished with it. Curaçao is, its aim for the future is dynamic growth on a sustainable basis, resulting in a balance between economic, social, and ecological dimensions. And as we all discussed this morning, as a small island and developing state in the Caribbean, we face specific challenges, and we need to take several risks into account with respect to our vulnerability when planning for our sustainable development, and also for building resilience, because that's what it is about. I mean, there are several menaces, there is climate change, there are many other risks that we face, but the point is that we need to build resilience. We need to prepare, and we need to plan, and we need to build the resilience. So resilience is defined as the ability to counter shocks and the ability to withstand the shocks. While vulnerability is inherent to small islands, strategies can be put in place to mitigate the risks and of being harmed by external shocks, and of course, by increasing our resilience. So to move from a position of vulnerability and dependence to one of resilience, we as small islands need to explore new areas of development, economic development, and in some cases, we need to diversify. So sound policies focus on broadening the options for small island economies should be designed to exploit interlinkages between sectors like agriculture, as mentioned earlier, but also tourism, which is very important for our islands, IT or ICT, and finance. So managing Curaçao's transformation and transition from a dependent economy to a resilient one requires strong managerial and political capacities. And Curaçao has considerable concerns about the threats posed by a changing climate. Mitigation and adaptation options next to economic diversification will require a significant and sustained investment of resources that the island would be unable to provide on its own. So it's not only just a matter of prioritizing. These are investments that are so big that a small island like Curaçao and any other island in our region or in the world, it's very difficult to bring up these resources if we want to plan for a sustainable future. So as such, our future development strategy has to be predicated on proactive, sensible, and practical measures that seek to respond to these global challenges while simultaneously exploiting the opportunities they present. So we need to go from vulnerabilities to opportunities. And that's what my presentation is going to be about. And one take that I would like to also launch from now, and hopefully we will be able to dialogue further, is that big problems cannot be solved in silos. So we need to work together in order to solve these big problems. So my presentation will discuss opportunities for funding through the EU. As mentioned, as a small island, we don't have all the economic and financial resources, and not even the people to solve all the big problems that we face with a changing climate. We will also talk about opportunities in Curaçao and what we are doing to tackle climate change, but also which areas of opportunities we have to collaborate with the public, private, and also civil society in our island, on our island, and internationally. So our EU desk, as mentioned earlier, was launched in 2018, and our objectives were, and still are, create awareness about the existence of EU funding programs, increase direct participation of Curaçao in EU funding programs, promote visibility of EU in Curaçao and vice versa, assist Curaçao organizations to effectively access EU funding, and foster more collaboration locally, regionally, and internationally. So in short, more effective use of available EU funding. What are the key benefits of having such a specialized desk here? We are creating in-house expert knowledge and competences. And we are on a regular watch to identify policy developments and financial opportunities. We define projects together with stakeholders in advance in order for when the calls of proposals arrive, we are ready and able to also join partnerships with other organizations in the EU. We also built a network and are still building a network and the ability to secure the partnerships through the representation in The Hague and in Brussels. In The Hague, we have the Curaçao House. In Brussels, we have OCTA. We are trying to get to a network with organizations and agencies in both the Netherlands and Belgium and the rest of Europe. And we manage in an efficient manner the time of the calls for proposal when they are published and send them out to several stakeholders on a regular basis. So increasing the local ability to directly access funds in support of the development of Curaçao. So there are three main European funding instruments. There are the structural and investment funds for big investments in the EU, several horizontal and thematic programs managed directly by Directorate Generals or executing agencies, or the national agencies in the member countries to carry out the European strategies. And there is the European Development Fund for Development Cooperation Aid in ACP countries and the OCTs. ACP stands for Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific, and OCTs, Overseas Countries and Territories, where Curaçao is also one of them. Our EU desk is focusing on number 2, several horizontal and thematic programs. So what are the EU horizontal and thematic programs? These are programs that are financed directly from the EU long-term budget, which is also known as the multi-annual financial framework. And that the new one was confirmed and has been in development or has been in implementation as of October of this year. So very short time ago, it was approved. It gives direct financial contribution through grants to finance an action to achieve EU policy objectives and priorities. And that's what it's about. Whatever we think or whatever we want to do, it needs to help the EU achieve its policy objectives and priorities. And they do that by publishing regularly calls for proposals on their EU funding and tender portal. It's very important. It's a very important source of information on EU funds that are being published or calls that are being published to realize an objective or priority of the EU. And applicants can apply directly to calls for proposals. So that's it's open for everyone. And our role is to let you know what of the opportunities so you can apply for these funds. The European Green Deal is a huge program that has to help the EU to recover from the pandemic that we are all still living in, and that will not leave us for the time being. So the European Green Deal, which started before the pandemic, but has been strengthened more due to the pandemic, and their aim is to reduce the European net greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. They also aim to for Europe to become world's first climate neutral continent by 2050 and making the European Green Deal a reality. And proposals on areas of clean environment, climate smarter transport, sustainable energy, and taxation policy to make EU's Green Deal a reality. I think these are objectives that most countries are now pursuing, and Curaçao is also pursuing that. So what has the Green Deal done in the last months and weeks that went by? They saw an opportunity to put blue into green. So to transfer blue economy into green economy in order for us to reach our goals much faster and to integrate the approaches even more. So the blue economy strategy of the EU is now part of the Green Deal strategy of the EU. And they have also some aims and objectives to produce more sustainable energy. So renewable energy is a priority, eliminate plastics from the seas, protect their marine areas with 30% by 2030, make sure that companies have a greener approach and a more sustainable approach in their processes and practices, and also be more circular and work more towards a circular economy. And these are also objectives that we also have in Curaçao and are currently working on. So to put blue economy to contribute to Green Deal objectives entails decarbonizing marine transport, fishing, and generating energy from oceans. So circular economy, as I mentioned, financial support for fishers to retrieve, collect, litter, and lost fishers' gears, marine biodiversity, marine protected areas, essential for fisheries and coastal economies, and climate adaptation, green coastal infrastructure, and coastal protection, sustainable food, as was discussed earlier, responsible fishing, but also bring stocks to sustainable levels. And these are aims that we also have in Curaçao. So a good match to pursue funds in the EU for the development in Curaçao. So There are several programs that are offering opportunities, funding opportunities for blue and green. So for blue economy, green economy, or the mix of both. You have Horizon Europe that has opportunities, and they are having 2 calls at this moment where our organizations can tap into EU's program. So Horizon Europe is consists of research and innovation activities, and these tackle climate change. They also help facilitate and realize the UN SDGs, and these are also multi-sectoral programs. Another program from the EU that has calls at this moment, active calls, is the LIFE program. And this is the EU's funding instrument for environment and climate actions. The European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund has at this moment also 1 call, and this supports innovative projects that contribute to sustainable exploitation and management of aquatic and marine resources. The Invest EU program, which supports 4 financing areas, for policy areas, sustainable infrastructure, research and innovation and digitization, SMEs and social investments and skills. And there is an ongoing European Development Fund, which is regional, and that falls under the 11th EDF, and that is the 𝗕𝗟𝗵𝗃 program. And this program stands for Resilience, Sustainable Energy and Marine Biodiversity, and they have open calls at this moment. So we can go into the details of these programs, but when you receive this presentation from the organizers, you will be able to dig into each of the calls that we have identified, and you can visit the EU funding and portal, where you will be able to also read all these possibilities. So as I mentioned, Horizon, LIFE, but also the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund. Invest EU has interesting calls, so you will be able to go into it. The EU funding and tender portal is here. So if you just Google EU funding and tender opportunities, you will be able to find it. And here we can see we search on climate change, and there are 44 calls at this moment as we speak available. It could even increase while we are in this webinar, because it happens all the time. So you need to be very alert in order to identify and find the calls that are being published, sometimes with very short deadlines, but sometimes also long enough for you to explore, find partners, and we are here to support you in this endeavor. And last but not least, the 𝗕𝗟𝗵𝗃 call that I mentioned, on 𝗕𝗟𝗵𝗃.org, you will be able to find all the conditions. It's especially for OCTs, and the project costs can range between 100,000 euros to 1.5 million euros. And the cutoff date of submissions is next year, 31st of March, and the implementation period is until June 2023. And I wanted to just give some indications because of this morning when the discussions were going. You know, I said, you know, let me give you some background of what is going on in Curaçao in the fields of tackling climate change, and that there is a lot going on, and maybe we need to start communicating much more, so our people, our population, but also our people living abroad, know what is happening in Curaçao. So I will not go into denying that we have a lot of policies and that we are very good in creating plans, but we are also implementing plans. And sometimes you see it, but sometimes you don't. But rest assured that a lot is being done in the field of tackling climate change. We have not signed the Paris Agreement as yet, because we need to have certain things in place, but it's looking into that direction in the near future. So since 2015, when the government participated in COP21 in Paris, we were there when the Paris Agreement was reached. We indicated that there are 4 strategies that we want to develop in order to mitigate and adapt to the consequences of climate change. And one of them is renewable energy. The other one is ocean management and coral reef protection as the natural way to protect our coastal protection. Mangrove protection and restoration is another natural way for coastal strengthening and protection, and sustainable water management. And a lot happened since then. And I wanted to just briefly touch them in order for you to see that we have these plans, we have these strategies, and so when there are funds available, we are in the position to present concrete projects that could be financed in order to accelerate our development more, instead of waiting for the funds, by prioritizing. And the resources are very small, so we need to be very careful in how we spend the money. Tackling climate change in Curaçao. So since 2015, when we identified the strategies, we did a policy assessment with the support of UNESCO, and the meteorological department is leading this process. Next to this Curaçao climate change policy assessment, we established also an interministerial and also public, private, and civil society committee to tackle all the various strategies and actions that has to come out of this policy assessment. And in March 2022, we will have a big conference where we will be presenting all of this and include everybody in developing the action planning for this trajectory of tackling climate change. We also have an integrated water resource management plan for Curaçao, which is also going to be launched on World Water Day on February 22nd. Public consultation is underway, where we will be presenting and giving more details about the water integrated water management plan. There is a Curaçao Integrated Water Management Resources Committee established, and I'm proud to be the chair of this committee. And since 2016, we've been working very hard in getting the water resources integrated into Curaçao, and it's looking very good and brilliantly for the near future. So, and we work very close with Professor Marchena, and we also have an MOU with the university where the civil engineering faculty will be very much involved in the implementation of this policy plan. Another area for tackling our climate change is the development of a policy for our ocean management, which also includes the coastal areas and strengthening of the coastal area of Curaçao. And while we worked on preserving our ocean, we also developed a plan for blue economy, where sustainably we will be able to make use of our marine resources and conserving our marine biodiversity. Our ocean is very important for us, for our economic development, but also for our biodiversity. And therefore, it's very important to make good use of the resources and make sure that we protect them for the future generation. So we have a deep sea water industry strategy plan and policy that we have developed to make good use of our ocean while protecting its biodiversity. Through OCTA, which is the Overseas Countries and Territories Association, a blue economy roadmap has been developed for all the OCTs, and for Curaçao specifically, that's also in there. And we have with the Wade Institute, who supported us in realizing the policy for conserving our Curaçao ocean, we have developed also a roadmap and strategy to realize a blue economy for Curaçao, where a lot of opportunities lie in research and development, but also in developing sustainable ways of using our maritime resources. Another point, since, as I mentioned, since 2015, when we participated in the COP21 in Paris, we also realized the energy policy for Curaçao, which has a very strong trajectory for a transition to more sustainable energy production. And in this case, it's in full implementation. An energy bureau is being established. It's already provisionally in the Ministry of Economic Development, but will become an authority in the field of energy transition. And together with all the stakeholders, we also prepared an energy policy, a new energy policy, which will be an instrument to implement this strategy. And we also have the industrial policy to build a resilient future. And therefore, we also created the public-private partnership for green growth with jobs in Curaçao, which is very important. So in order to develop the green and blue strategy in Curaçao, there is also the opportunity in the Living Lab that recently was established and also was signed with TNO in the Netherlands, where we will turn the areas around the refinery into more sustainable energy production. And we have a green recovery for resilience plan for our small businesses to also become more aware of the effects of their actions on the environment, and so try to mitigate the climate change effects for Curaçao. And of course, the mangrove park that has been developed as part of the strategy to strengthen our coasts by protecting our mangroves. And this is an example on how you can make it accessible for the public, but also build resilience and also protect the natural resources for coastal strengthening. So building partnerships through the SDGs, we have the SDG committee, we have the Curaçao Sustainability Coalition, where public, private, and civil society can meet, and also the Greening the Government initiative, which is an international initiative led by the US and Canada, where we will be, as government, involved in greening more, making more our practices and processes more green and sustainable. So opportunities are here to explore and to tap into EU funds to realize these opportunities. And the EU desk is here to help you realize that. So you can contact us so we can help you through the jungle, as was mentioned by our colleague, the colleague before me, of funding possibilities. We try to make it more accessible, more user-friendly for you. And of course, you can contact us at eudeskcuraçao@gobiane.cw, or follow us on Facebook, or through Europe Direct. They also know how to find us. Thank you very much for your attention.